safe and happy. I'm here to talk about research, main characteristics, its types, scope, and paradigm shift. The course code is EDU226, and you are listening to Dr. Deepa Sikand Kauts, Head Department of Education, Guru Nanak Dev University, Amritsar. In this presentation, I'll be discussing with you meaning of research. After quoting some important definitions, this will also elaborate the characteristics of research along with the illustrations. I'll be talking about various types of researches like descriptive research, experimental research, qualitative research, quantitative research, research along with paradigm shift to mixed methods research. Let's understand what is research. First of all, we'll take up the defined uh, meanings of research through various authors. Leedy and Ormond. Research is mistaken for gathering information, documenting facts, and rummaging for information. Research is the process of collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data in order to understand a phenomena. The research is a systematic wherein defining objective, managing data, communicating findings occur within established frameworks and existing guidelines. The frameworks and guidelines provide researchers with an indication of what to include in the research, how to perform the research, and what types of inferences are probable based on the data collected. Now, these are the definitions of research given by authors. From these definitions, what we found out? We find that research is a systematic investigation. It is it is an art of scientific investigation. It means we are trying to search for knowledge base. We are trying to search for either new knowledge base or to strengthen the already existing knowledge base. It is systematic in its nature, and it is a diligent systematic inquiry into the various variables, into the various genre of knowledge which is existing, and then validating that existing knowledge to make, to generate either new knowledge or strengthen the existing knowledge. Clifford Vue has defined research as formulating hypotheses, collecting, organizing, evaluating data, making deduction, reaching conclusion, and listing, careful testing the conclusion to determine whether they fit the formulating hypothesis or not. Now, Clifford says that research can take place only when you, first of all, formulate the hypothesis. And then accordingly, you reach the data, you collect the data, you analyze the data, you find the conclusion, and then you relate your conclusion to the formulated hypothesis, whether the hypothesis formulated is accepted or not accepted. Then Selister and Stephenson in the Encyclopedia of Social Sciences define research as the manipulation of things, concepts or symbols for the purpose of generalizing to extend, correct, or verify knowledge, whether that knowledge aids in construction of theory or in the practice of an art. Now, again, you find that in this definition, there is verification of knowledge, and then generalization of knowledge, and then there is construction of some theory, or there is some construction of some art, the practice of an art. Now, when we look at the definition, then we can drive the characteristics of research. The research, the first and foremost characteristic is it should be objective in nature. It should not be subjective. It should not have biases. It should be objective in nature. The meaning which a research concludes for one member or for one researcher, the same meaning it concludes for the other researcher. It should be valid. It should be valid. Whatever it says, it means. It should be it should have credibility. We can depend on that. Generalization should be there. Generalization is a major characteristic of research, that we have conducted research on certain population, on certain sample, and then from that sample results, we can generalize it to its population. Verifiability. If one researcher has conducted a research, that research can be verified in different situations as well. Accuracy. The results have to be accurate. Reliability. That we can rely on the research, that whatever the results are coming, we can take it that the results are authentic. Precision. There should be no dilemmas. There should be precision in the results. These are the characteristics of research. There are some more characteristics, like the research is relevant, it is properly designed, the maximum controls are exhibited, it is empirical in nature, that is scientific, it is critical also. Critically, it has been analyzed and it can be analyzed. It is systematic because it has to be scientific. It is rigorous in nature. Research is always a rigorous process and it is consistent. We cannot say that here the research stops and now and here the research starts. It is consistent in its flow. What is the scope of educational research? Now, educational research has got many areas in its scope, like philosophy of education is there, sociology of education. We can apply education research in philosophy of education, sociology of education, teacher education, curriculum, inclusive education, environmental education, peace education, children education, adolescents education, number of areas in which we can use the principles of education research. We have got scope of education research. And we can have different areas, methodologies for going into these type of areas. Like we can have historical research in philosophy of education also. We can have descriptive research in philosophy of education also. Experimental research can be conducted in philosophy of education, and we can go for action research as well. Now, when we look at the methods we follow, then the researches can be classified as historical research. Historical research follows historical method. When we look into the past events of some phenomena, of some event, of some situation, of some content, of some context, it is historical research. Descriptive research. When we try to find the relationships, we try to find out the meanings, it is descriptive research, and we use a descriptive method. Experimental research, when we try to manipulate the variables, we try to have manipulation of the variables and we try to control the intervening variables, then it is experimental research. The experimental method is followed in experimental research. And in experimental research, control is important. It is very pertinent to experimental research. Action research. When we follow action method, meaning we need to take action in immediate context. Action research means we are doing research to find a solution to the immediate problems which we are facing. Right? Nowadays, we are facing COVID-19. So, very small researches, very small surveys which we are taking up, we are trying to find out the solution to immediate problem we are facing due to COVID-19. Then we have another way of qualifying types of research, descriptive versus analytic. When we try to describe the factors, it is descriptive. Analytical, when we analyze the factors into different sub-factors and try to find out the correlations or the relationships or try to describe them, it becomes analytical. Quantitative versus qualitative. When we quantify the research data, it is quantitative in nature. When we derive conclusion on the quantification of the data, it is quantitative research. But when we derive conclusion on the quality of the data, qualities found in the data, it is qualitative research. Conceptual research versus empirical research. Conceptual research, we are trying to build the concepts. The new concepts are coming up. The new terminology is coming up. But empirical research, that is the scientific research, it is more observatory, it is more experimental, it is more verifiable. Then applied versus fundamental research. Fundamental research is when we are trying to add to the existing fund of knowledge, or we are trying to fill the gaps in the existing fund of knowledge. That is fundamental research. And applied research, when we actually take up the research results into the fields where we are trying to find out their application, and we are trying to find that what exactly the research does when it is practically applied in the field, what type of results we get when we apply in the research field. Fundamental is giving us the ideals, whereas applied research is helping us to understand the how much practically possible is the research in the applied situations. Then we can have another way of types of research. One-time research versus longitudinal research. Meaning thereby we are studying one generation, the next generation, the next generation. So it is a longitudinal research. Or we are studying one individual at a particular stage of time, then another stage of time, then third stage of time, fourth stage of time, child, adolescent, adult, old age. It's a longitudinal research. Clinical or diagnostic research. When we try to find out what are the factors which are responsible for the particular results, we go into diagnostic. We try to diagnose an event, that what could be the factors which could be associated with this event. Clinical research, when we are working for the solution of a problem in a laboratory, that is clinical research. Then conclusion oriented versus decision oriented research. We are trying to conduct the research to trace the, to find out the, to come out at the decision. And conclusion oriented research, when we try to conclude about the situation, that what factors are resulted, are creating the effect of this particular results, conclusion results. Exploratory research versus descriptive research. Exploratory research is basically a research which is done at a preliminary level to find out what are the factors coming up, what are the new factors, what are the new concepts. In a way, it is trying to help us to build a theory. We sometimes refer to it as a grounded theory. And descriptive research, wherein we are trying to describe the phenomena, the factors, the events related with that particular phenomena. Field setting research or laboratory research or simulation research. Field setting research is when we conduct the research in actual field situations. For example, the ethnographical studies are actually conducted in the fields. Laboratory research, all these scientific researches are conducted in laboratories. Simulation research, where the fear factors is involved, where the lot of what you call fears and a lot of resources, where innumerable resources are involved, and much of time is involved, then we try to minimize the resources and the time through simulation research. Many a times the researches which are conducted in the field of defense are conducted in simulated settings. So it is called simulation research. Now, what are the steps which we follow in quantitative research? Step one is we identify a problem area. Then we try to review the already done researches in that problem area. Then we evaluate the literature. Then we become clear about what research questions we can raise for this particular problem area, and those questions help us to frame the hypothesis. Then we select the appropriate research approach, that what type of research will be helpful in this particular problem, and then we try to decide the population, delimit the population, find out the sample, and go for data collection. After collecting data, we try to code the data, and we try to put the data in such a manner so that we can go further for the analysis. And after analyzing, we conclude and write up the report and disseminate the report to the concerned stakeholders. But when the research steps which are followed in qualitative approach is a little bit different. Here, we decide on a question we want to study. We try to review the literature, if available, with respect to that study. We evaluate whether the qualitative research is right fit for our research question or not. Then we look for this thing, whether our research question is telling to the qualitative research or not, or we should go for quantitative research. We consider the ideal sample size, because in qualitative research, sample size is very, very important. Then we try to choose the qualitative research methodology, that whether we want to conduct ethnographic research, whether we want to conduct phenomenological research, whether we want to take up case study research. So we have to decide the qualitative research methodology. Then we collect the data. The data collection is done by the researcher himself. So here the tools are totally with the researcher. It is the researcher who prepares the tools himself or herself and then collects the data, analyze the data, and write up the research report. But during this transition period to postmodernism, from modernism to postmodernism, what has been found is that there are so many problems with quantitative research, so many problems are coming with qualitative research. So researcher tries to minimize those limitations by adopting mixed methods research. And mixed method research is taking its own place in the academia. It is basically a hybrid method, that it takes up few the strengths of quantitative research method and takes up a few strengths of qualitative research methods, and then go through the research and conclude with the what you call results and the reports. So during this postmodernism, everywhere mixed method research design is becoming very popular, and it's trying to overcome the criticisms related to qualitative and quantitative research methods. Now, if we look at the limitations of quantitative method, we find it is overgeneralized. Why it is overgeneralized? There is a reason. Because in social sciences research, most of the research is done on human behaviors, human patterns, social groups, wherever human beings are involved. And human behavior is very difficult to be quantified. It is very difficult to say who is happy, who is more happy, who is less happy. So there is difficulty in the quantification of the human behavior. Hence, we go for our results lead to overgeneralization. Then we ignore the minute details. That is very important, because in to every behavior we are giving a number. That is not a continuum. Human behavior is a continuum. So when we give a number, it means it is there, it is not there. It is there, yes, it is there, it is not. It never happens in human behavior. So what happens? The results get averaged. We get the average results. And when we generalize the results on the population, the average results are being generalized. So this is the biggest limitation of quantitative method. There is weakness of qualitative method as well. It is having small size. Why small size? We cannot take 100 teachers and minutely we observe every teacher in the classroom for his teaching, learning, interaction patterns. So it requires small size, because we have to observe, we have to interact, we have to note the minute details. We cannot generalize. Now, when we talk of quantitative research, we may give example that when you cook rice, you just take one or two flakes of rice and crush them to find whether they are cooked or not. But we cannot say about human beings that you pick one or two human beings, you study, and then you generalize over all the human beings. That is overgeneralization. And in qualitative research, since you take very small sample, so it lacks generalizability. It could be get biased also, because here the researcher is playing a main role. It is the researcher who is observer. It is the researcher who is participatory. It is the researcher who is interviewing. It is the researcher who is noting down. Right? So, what is, I mean, the complete researcher is involved. So, it could lead to bias also. Researcher may have liking for something. Researcher may have a perception of some event. A researcher may have some personal experiences. So, what happens? It is leading to more of biases. It lacks proper methodological rigor. Proper methodological rigor, why it is missing? Because we cannot pre-decide in qualitative research. We keep moving ahead as the things keep proceeding. But in quantitative research, we pre-decide very carefully. We decide the variables, the design, the blueprint, the method of study. Here, we cannot decide precisely exactly. We go by it, and keep when the things keep unfolding, we keep moving forward, and sometimes we keep changing. So it lacks that rigor. It is either too complex or too narrow in nature, and it's time consuming. It's money consuming. It is energy consuming. It is labor consuming. Intense labor is required. You have to be very keen observer. You have to be very keen evaluator. You have to have that eye that you don't miss even the minutest detail of the data. So it means it requires a very, very, very precise researcher, a researcher who is objective in himself or herself. So this is a strong weakness of qualitative method. Now, I suggest these readings through a few articles from various journals as well. You may go through it, and it will help you to understand that why we should go for mixed method research, why the paradigm shift has come from quantitative to qualitative research. Thank you so much. Have a good day.